Hello everyone, Richard here. Okay, so let's talk about the Peachy printer. My God, where to start? This thing's been doing my head in all day. We had some messages and updates on the Peachy printer campaign on Kickstarter and various videos posted to YouTube, and they're totally ridiculous, unbelievable what's gone on with the Peachy printer. So I just wanted to sort it out in my own mind and just go through a few things just for people that may not know enough about the Peachy printer or what this total mess is. So okay, so I haven't got the budget of the Peachy printer, well, the budget they used to have, to do all the fancy graphics and everything else. So I've done a few things just to help me and you as the viewer to understand a little bit more about the Peachy printer. So first of all, here's my drawing of the Peachy printer, and we're going to talk a little bit about how it's supposed to work. So these two guys set up an original Kickstarter with a reasonable demo of a 3D printer that was designed to be fairly innovative at the time. And what it was we had basically a resin vat that could produce parts in UV curable resin. So it's basically a stereolithography 3D printer, but the clever bit was they were going to use galvanometers, which are basically mirrors that are on tiny little magnets and coils that can be moved very specifically to a location. So these two magnet coils were going to be driven by the audio output of a PC, which is reasonably clever. As an engineer, you look at that and you think, okay, that's quite a neat little way of doing it, but actually it causes loads of problems and there's loads of issues that you would probably not do it that way in reality. And they were going to use the mic input, which is an input back into the PC, to drip saline water into a beaker to float the resin on the top of the water. And the idea with that is we have a laser beam that's directed by the two galvos into our vat of resin, and the drip, drip, drip rises the resin level and allows you to draw the picture of whatever you're printing, cat in this case, nice cat, and eventually you end up with a 3D object. Pretty sort of low resolution because all of this is a little bit difficult to set up and tune and everything else. But in the end, yeah, you should end up with a reasonable 3D printed object. That was the idea, and the idea was to do it for $100. So the Kickstarter went off and they did a Kickstarter and an Indiegogo. People keep forgetting that there's also Indiegogo and there's other sources of income into the Peachy printer. Okay, and that was quite successful. It generated $587,435.73, which is great. So Rylan, the CEO, and David, the financial controller, they were 50-50 stake each in Peachy printer. What they've posted on their website, which is utterly bizarre. It's a huge amount of effort to go to. There's graphs, there's wiggly lines, there's all sorts of pie charts and loads of facts and figures and statistics trying to prove that the money got spent, got used, got ill-appropriated, various other things, and there's also some other things. So I've got my final little graph, which I hope you appreciate these. I spent a lot of time working on these. Anyway, we had a government grant for development, $135,000. We had a government grant for salaries, $90,000. We have a family loan, $50,000. We have the Kickstarter at $587,435. And we also have Indiegogo, remember that one, at $74,000. So Peachy actually had $936,500 and more dollars to spend on this development. And that's where I have the biggest problem. So, wow, this whole project was nice when it was launched, and people thought, yeah, great, it's going to be open source, that's wonderful. We can use it for education, we can show kids how to build really nice little 3D printers, and it will be really useful. So everyone was quite positive at the start, saying, yeah, this is great. They're doing it open source. It's a cheap little printer. It shouldn't take long to do, because it shouldn't. This is a simple, straightforward development, and everyone will be happy. The files still aren't released as open source and nothing's out there. And actually, whenever, if this ever happened, and I know some people did get backing pledges, and they did get some early kits for the Peachy, but in the reality, this whole thing with the resin and the vat and the printing little cats is just going to be a bit of a nightmare, to be honest, because everything was really wrong with that whole audio input and mic connection, because that's analog and it's horrible. It's different for each PC. You get noise, you get all sorts of things, you've got to filter, and that's just horrible. So the very second the Kickstarter went up, the first thing I thought was, yeah, you wouldn't do it like that. As an engineer, you'd just put a $2 microcontroller in, USB, and take away that horrible connection. You can still drive the galvos, and you can still drive the Z-axis, the drip, 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 and you can still listen to the drips, because here is just a little electrical connection sensing when the drips happen, so you know how much water level you've got in there. So you can still all do that with a little microcontroller, and it's just a USB connection, and it's going to be so much easier for everyone to do. So, and I think they eventually found that as during the development cycle, maybe it was this point here where they were having pina coladas and doing other things and all that sort of stuff, they worked out that digital was going to be a little bit easier. So something happened and things did move on, but it took a very, very long time. The main point of this is this development shouldn't have been very difficult at all, and they've almost spent $1 million somehow getting not very far. They've got some stock and they've got some parts, and they're trying to figure out how to do it. And Ryland's trying to basically carry on. Again, the problem with this project, it was never that viable. They got a lot of money, but that's because people wanted a $100 printer. They didn't really think about what they were going to do with it. Do they want to print more than little cats, little plastic cats out of resin? And what is it going to be? You know, it was great to support a community feeling of a project that was going to be open source, but none of that's really happened, and all this money's gone away and disappeared. And even if we had the files now, not everything else for Peachy, it's just almost worthless. There's better ways to do this now. Daylight resins, you could do this with a projector from China. You can buy for about $30 a 2 Galvo XY projector system, put a laser, a UV laser in there, or use a normal laser and just use daylight resins, and end up with a system that was, you know, you could probably do this for $50 now. It's not difficult. This is not that complicated. It shouldn't have taken forever to get to this point. So all in all, I'm very frustrated and disappointed, but the most disappointment is the fact that these videos have been published and all this evidence of misappropriation of funds and things are trying to somehow mask the fact that we don't really know what's gone on for all these few years that the Peachy's been around, and the timeline, something's wrong with this timeline that they've posted up on YouTube. So I don't know, maybe that'll come out in the next week or whatever, but there's something that needs to happen. So I hope you enjoyed all my little charts and graphs, and oh, that's just a picture of a cat. Yeah, I don't know why that was there, but that's just yeah. Everything else is really just a bit sad, and the whole Peachy campaign is now looking like no one's going to get anything after this, and we don't really know what's going to happen. Now, stepping back from this, I never backed this campaign, so I'm not a backer of this campaign. I'm just annoyed for everyone that thought it was a great idea and wanted a small, cheap 3D printer. So I've got nothing really to gain from this other than the fact that it just doesn't make sense. And as an engineer, I look at this problem and think this should have been solved years ago. And no one else has done this in the meantime, because it's basically not a great idea. It's not a brilliant way of making a printer. It's going to be messy. You've got saline, you've got resins, you've got setup with all these galvos and lasers and stuff, and it's just going to be a pain to have to use. So I hope something good comes out of it, but it doesn't look like it's going to be. We could be ending up having just a complete and utter disaster with this Peachy project. And 3D printing, low-cost 3D printing projects have plagued with failures across Kickstarter and Indiegogo. So anyway, that's all I want to say. I just want to get it off my chest. And please feel free to comment or even think about that timeline, or cats, 3D printed cats, whatever you want. But yeah, comment, subscribe, do whatever you want. See you next time.